Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JustinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another episode of the show. I don't really know what I'm calling this series. It's just more interviews, talking about things. I don't know. It's really early. What time is it? It's 6 o'clock in the morning here in LA. So you guys know I love you. Up super early to talk to you guys about all the talent that's coming out of the Portuguese League. It's something that I feel like has been a growing trend over the last couple of years. We've seen so many players come out of that league and come to the Premier League and do really, really well. And this summer, it seems like even more coming. So I wanted to get an expert on to talk about that league and the players that could potentially be coming and the players that have already sealed moves. So Darwin Nez, obviously he's Uruguayan. Before you guys try to cook me, I see you guys in the comment section try to cook me like he's Uruguayan. I know that, but he came from that league, right? Darwin Nez to Liverpool, Fabio Vieira to Arsenal. And then we're also going to talk about Ottavio, Palhinha, and Matheus Núñez because they all look like they could potentially be Premier League bound. And so just one of these light, fun conversations. So make sure you guys are liking the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's see who is in here. You guys, if you want, there is going to be a show a little bit later at 6:30 p.m. UK time where we'll do a regular daily download to talk about Gabriel Jesus, Matt Turner, Lisandro Martinez, and Rafinha, where we are with those deals. This is just something a little bit different. So if you guys want to talk about that stuff, make sure you come back, but stay here because this is also going to be a really interesting conversation. You'll get more information around Fabio Vieira at the least. So before, to get started, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guest, and it's none other than Zach Lowy. Hey, Zach.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. I can't complain. It's very early, but I'm happy to have you on the channel and to talk to you about the Portuguese League and what's going on there and all the growth and all the talent and all that kind of stuff. But I want to give you an opportunity to just I've never had you on the channel, so I have your website and your Twitter handle in the description box. But can you tell people a little bit about yourself? What kind of content you're putting out there, what your expertise is, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on my personal account, Zach Lowy, ZachLowy, as well as on BTL Vid, and that is the main account for our website, breakingthelines.com. So at Breaking Lines, we do a lot of football-related content on plenty of different aspects. Not just men's football, we're also trying to get into women's football. But yeah, we've actually done a lot of Arsenal-related content as well. Done a lot of got 2 articles on Gabriel Jesus done and how he could fit at Arsenal. We've done one on Fabio Vieira, and obviously going to have more and more stuff. So definitely something for Arsenal fans to look at. Also doing a lot of interviews and podcasts as well. I myself am definitely a Portuguese football. I guess you could call me an expert. But yeah, I write about Portuguese football for a number of different websites. I also have my weekly podcast, Cortelinhas, which on summer break at the moment. But yeah, we've covered really in a wide variety of subjects this season. One of my goals this season on the first full season of Cortelinhas was to cover not just not just focusing on the big 3, but all of the teams in the Primeira Liga. So that's definitely something that I've tried to prioritize and get fans on from almost every team in the top flight. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Portuguese football and yeah, definitely excited.
Awesome. So this is something that this is the main reason why I wanted you on. Obviously, player profiles, that kind of stuff is fun, but what has been the shift over the last couple of years in terms of the Portuguese League and that becoming somewhat of a hotbed of talent, and in particular Premier League teams looking towards that league to recruit from? I look at a team like Liverpool who did a lot of recruitment in league and is now looking like every time there's a star coming out of that the Portuguese league, they're ready to grab them. You see the likes of Luis Diaz and also Darwin Nunez. What is it about that league that's changed over the last couple of seasons to become somewhat of like a premier place to look for talent?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. When I first got into Portuguese football, I think that most of the players who were coming through were like South American youngsters, such as I mean Radamel Falcao, James Rodriguez at Porto, good examples, but so many more. I think that has changed somewhat with regards to third-party ownership. TPO has been outlawed by FIFA, so we don't see as many of those deals, but Portuguese teams are still bringing in those players from South America. And I think that's one thing that you cannot ignore with Portugal is that, location, location, location. They have an ideal location. They are pretty much located in between South America and well, obviously not geographically in between, but they've got South America on one side and they've got the rest of Europe on the other side. So I think that definitely helps. And I also think that for Brazilian players, obviously, it's not that much of a jump. Speaking the same language, as well as for a lot of Spanish-speaking South American players, Spanish and Portuguese they aren't too different, so you can pick up on it easily. And in general, I think that a lot of South American players they may feel like Portugal is not that much of a step, whereas maybe going to Denmark or Sweden would be. But yeah, I think that it's clear that Portugal is going to keep on improving as one of the main production leagues. I think there are a few reasons for that. One, look, I think that one thing that people tend to forget when looking at these players who are impressing in the Portugal's big three and thinking, can they make the step up to the Premier League? The fact is, getting a playing time for one of the big three is absolutely is a very tough task. And
And
two,
who are the
once
big 3? Just really quick, I don't wanna
yeah,
cut you off, but who
so
are the big 3?
os três grandes, they are Benfica, Porto, and Sporting. Um, so with the exception of two teams, those three teams have won every single Primeira Liga title, and I think the only two exceptions are Belenenses in 1946 and Boavista in 2001. So yeah, with the exception of those two teams, the Benfica, Porto, or Sporting um, have won every single Primeira Liga title.
Oh, that's insane. So they have definitely a monopoly, like, they know what they're doing, and they're definitely the superpowers there. So, just kinda moving into players specifically, for this particular channel, we talk about Arsenal mostly. Fabio Vieira is a deal that came out of absolutely nowhere, and a lot of Arsenal fans are really excited about him. Everybody's becoming somewhat of an expert on him, bringing you in here to tell us actually what's going on with him. But were you surprised to see him make the jump, this summer, you know, personally?
Yeah, I think so. I think that most people who cover the Portuguese league would be surprised because, well, for a number of reasons. One, Fabio Vieira has not played for the country's senior team, but and so that's something that comparing him with other Portuguese players and South American players who got big moves out of Portugal, that's something that they have all done. But with that being said, it's very hard if you're a smaller attacking midfielder like Fabio breaking into a team that already has Bernardo Silva, Joao Moutinho, all these I think smaller players. So yeah, definitely easier said than done. Another thing is that Fabio Vieira was not necessarily a first choice on the team sheet. He definitely had an important role to play in Porto's domestic double, but I mean, looking at his progression at Porto, obviously coming through the youth ranks, doing very well for Porto and Portugal's youth teams, winning some silverware there, and then getting his debut during Project Restart, barely, coming off the bench a lot in 2020, 21, and then the next season I would say is where things started to pick up, specifically after the U21 the U21 Euros for Portugal. I think that you can look at my tweets in last year and prior to that. My biggest criticism of Sergio Conceição, the Porto manager, was always that he does not trust young talents enough. But I think that really changed after the U21 Euros of last year, because Portugal, they were able to get to the final. They had a fantastic run. I think that opened his Conceição's eye to how much talent he has, because you saw a few players in that team like Vitinha, Diogo Costa, the goalkeeper, Fabio Vieira, players who were not playing anywhere near as much. And after the tournament, they managed to get starting spots. But whereas Diogo Costa, has really locked down the starting spot in goal from this first day of the season, and has actually ended up starting for Portugal's senior team. I think he's a good bet to start in Qatar. And Vitinha, since around November, when he got a chance to get consistent starts, he hasn't let that go. He's become indispensable, and and just a few months after doing so, he's going to get a move to Paris Saint-Germain. So I thought that Vitinha would be the first player to leave Porto, because his release clause is slightly lower than Fabio's. He had a 40 million euro release clause as opposed to Fabio's 50 million. So that was one factor. But Fabio as well, with that being said, he ended up signing a contract. He was set to leave on a free transfer this summer. So he signed a contract extension alongside Diogo Costa, and I think that helped in many ways. But with that being said, he was still sort of a sporadic player in the first half of the season. I wouldn't say that it really wasn't until they sold Luis Diaz, Porto, in January, that he started getting regular opportunities. He still wasn't a guaranteed starter, but he did start far more than he had in his entire Porto career. So typically what you would see with Porto would be Vitinha and Matheus Uribe in the double pivot, Marco Grujic coming in for Uribe when he was injured later on in the season. And then you'd have on the wings, you could have Otávio or Pepe, Otávio and Fabio Vieira. You could even have Otávio and Pepe with Fabio Vieira often acting as a second striker. And that's one thing that I think definitely caught Mikel Arteta's eye is one, Vieira is a very versatile player. He's operated as a wide playmaker. He's operated as a number 10. He's operated as a second striker. In many ways, actually keeping out in my opinion, Porto's best player in 2020-21, Mehdi Taremi, from the starting lineup, and kind of occupying that Taremi role of half 9, half 10, and playing alongside Evan Nielsen and doing quite well as kind of a second striker. So he did very well. And also another thing is that he doesn't necessarily need to play 75 minutes to make an impact. He can come off the bench and change the game. So I think that having a player of his unique quality was super important for Porto, because they made a calculated bet in January. They had to sell Luis Diaz because they hadn't sold a single player in the prior summer, and they had failed to reach the Champions League knockout round. So they didn't. Their hands were sort of tied there, and they had to sell him for under market value. But I think that they realized that with Mehdi Taremi and Evan Nielsen and Tony Martinez as the center forward options, with Otávio and Pepe, new signing Wenderson Galeno covering you on the wings, and with Fabio Vieira, a player who is going to be able to operate in a number of different positions, will probably be okay. And obviously that ended up working out just fine for Porto. They they won the domestic double. They secured 91 points, I think, which is a record for Primera teams. And they actually ended up tying the highest unbeaten streak in the history of Europe's top 6 leagues, tying the Milan in the early 90s with Fabio Capello and Arrigo Sacchi. Actually, if they had gotten one more game without losing, they would have been the sole occupiers, but they ended up losing to Braga. So yeah, it's Porto and Milan who are tied for that. I think 58 games. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the thing about like Arsenal fans right now are just so desperate to figure out what kind of player he actually is. And like you've already kind of talked about his versatility. And what I liked about like his initial interview is that he was saying that he liked Emil Smith Rowe and Saka the way that they played, but he looked at Odegaard as somebody who was quite similar. In contrast, Adu, when he did his interview, he said that Fabio Vieira is somebody that, no one in the current Arsenal team has those same characteristics. And then there's also the Bernardo Silva, links as well. Do you think those Bernardo Silva links in particular is like a lazy comparison because of maybe his height and he's Portuguese, or do you think there actually is some similarities between him and Bernardo Silva, because he does quite a similar thing I think for Manchester City, where he's somebody that can play in pretty much every position and do it very well.
Look, I mean, he's definitely a maverick, right? It's a player who I think is hard to define, but there's definitely some Bernardo Silva. There's also some, I would say, Bruno Fernandes, as well as, look at some older Portuguese players like Deco, Rui Costa. I definitely see some aspects in them. Yeah, when I saw the reports and when I did this long thread on my personal account on Fabio Vieira, my main concern was how Mikel Arteta is going to get him and Odegaard into the same team. But with that being said, I think that yes, they are similar players. I think they both are, left-footed. They like to operate in the right half spaces. But with that being said, I think that they're different kinds of tens. For me, Fabio is more about threading the needle with an inch perfect through ball and picking out his teammate with an excellent pass. He really has the vision and creativity that I think perhaps is a superior aspect than say Odegaard. I think you could argue that he's a different type of player. And yeah, I would also say that I think that people are naturally they will naturally assume that a player who's a natural 10 is a luxury player because obviously the 10 is sort of a dying breed in today's game. But with that being said, Fabio has showcased that he's capable of not only fitting into a number of different positions, but also a number of different formations. Right? He's a player who, okay, is not going to be the most aggressive or physically imposing, but he's also not going to be a fish out of water, right? The Portuguese league is an incredibly physical league, and maybe not as much as the Premier League, but it's something that he's shown that he can cope with. I think he's shown that he can do it in big games. So I think that's definitely one reason to be optimistic about this. And yeah, while I didn't think that Fabio was going to be the first Porto player to get a big move, I actually did. I sent out a tweet, I think, the day that Liverpool signed Darwin Nunez and said, like, oh, after Darwin, I think these players are going to be, the next to get a big move. And Fabio Vieira was on that list
I
because
saw that list. Yeah. I was like, who else?
but his
Yeah.
talent is clear to see, and so yeah, I think that it's a good deal for Arsenal. I think that a lot of Porto fans as well, they were complaining that
Mm.
they sold Fabio too low. His release clause was 50 million euros. They ended up selling him for 35 million plus 5
Mhm.
million in add-ons. So overall, I don't think it's that. Yes, there's some risk involved, but overall, I like this deal for Arsenal.
Yeah, and just to tie up the Fabio Vieira talk is the influence of Jorge Mendes and, his influence on Arsenal's window so far. We have never really worked with super agents. It's been something that Arsene Wenger over the years has been a little bit reluctant to do. He's said like he's not really into that. And so as a result, Arsenal in the post Arsene Wenger era have kind of, I think, been clumsy with the use of with agents. We've seen the likes of like Kia come through and give us players that weren't amazing. But with Jorge Mendes, it feels different. Some reports had come out that the Fabio Vieira deal was somewhat of like a beginning of a relationship, somewhat of a sweetener kind of deal between Arsenal and um, forgive me if I say it long, Gestafoot. Just a foot.
Just a foot. Yeah, just a foot.
Yeah, and then that would be kind of like how they work around the Rafinha deal. Do you think Arsenal working with somebody of the stature of Jorge Mendes could be good for them, especially in the position that Arsenal are in, where they're still a big six club, but they're not Man City or Liverpool. They can't just walk up and get whoever they want.
I just want to correct you. It's George Mendes, not Jorge Mendes.
Okay, okay, got it. George Mendes.
It's Portuguese people get very offended when you pronounce the J
I'm
like.
sorry, guys. I'm sorry. George Mendes. Got it.
George Mendes and Jose Mourinho, not Jose.
Got it.
Look, with regards to Mendes, I think that he is. Look, I think that he's somebody who you kind of have to take him for what he is, you know. And I think at the end of the day, he is one of the most powerful men in football, if not the most. He's somebody who makes deals happen. He's somebody who is sort of in every club at all times. He's like able to get this transfer done there. He's a facilitator. Okay, so I think that the teams that have allowed themselves to get burnt by Mendes in the past, there are plenty of examples. Monaco, Valencia, plenty of Portuguese teams as well who just have said it like we don't want to do business with him. But in many ways, they are sort of, I think, putting their pride or putting their ego above their common sense because, yes, Mendes is, maybe he is bad for football, but with that being said, he's somebody who's incredibly connected, incredibly powerful, can make these deals happen for under the market price. He can get these players to them. So I think that to call him a villain and say, "Oh, George Mendes is everything that's wrong with football," for me, it's a lazy assertion. I personally think that, yeah, I think that commissions are a big problem. I think that there needs to be something to rein in the amount that one agent or one agency can make off a player's transfer. And I'm pretty sure that George
Mhm.
Mendes is. I, I think I saw a report saying that Just Food are going to make like 13 million euros from Vitinha and Fabio's transfers. I'll have to double check that, but he's going to make quite a lot of money, probably more money than he should. With that being said, though, there's a reason for that. And Porto are going to, accept that because they recognize that George Mendes is somebody who, yes, he can not only yes, he's going to be able to sell these players that you need to sell. Because if you don't
Mhm.
sell them, then you might wind up in the same situation that you were a few months ago, where right you don't make a single player sale, and then you're forced to sell your best player midway through the season. But not only that, he's somebody who's also connected with, I think, smaller agents and other clubs. He's somebody who, Porto might be saying, "Oh, we want Joao Victor from Corinthians. Can you make this happen?" Calls up a few people, So he's somebody who's not even, even when it doesn't look like he has a signature written on it. He's somebody who can make things happen and who can really thread the needle. So in no ways is this like a promotional ad for George Mendes, but like
It doesn't feel like that. It feels very balanced, so
if
I
you're
don't think you're
saying
wrong.
that like he's, my club should never work with George Mendes again, honestly, I think you're just like setting yourself up for, maybe not setting yourself up for failure, but um you are reducing the amount of options you have to make this transfer, whether it's a player sale or a player purchase, come to fruition.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a difference of opinion on whether or not super agents are the biggest problem or not. I think you've laid it out very perfectly, that commissions are a big issue, but for a club, especially for Arsenal, where we're at, it's just being a Europa League club, you are going to need to work with people to get at the head of the queue for certain types of players. So for me, if it takes, maybe having to pay a little bit more in commissions, I think it's the right thing to do to get us where we want to go. We just have to make sure that those investments work out for us in the long run. And you won't really know that until later. But I mean, I like it. I'm not about to sit here and act like I didn't like that little. I was like, okay, look at Arsenal getting smart, So I love that. But there's about 200 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys are liking the video, subscribing to the channel. Let's move on to Darwin Nunez. So Arsenal were like kind of linked with him. I did like a whole scouting video on him for absolutely nothing. Liverpool fans, you can use it now because he did not come to us. He went to Liverpool, but just kind of starting off on Nunez. Are you surprised at how much Liverpool ended up spending on him? There was a lot of, especially in England, a lot of talk around, the fee being so big for what some people would consider a prospect and maybe somewhat of a risk. Were you surprised at how much Liverpool ended up paying for him?
Um, not really. No, I think that look, I have done a lot of videos and articles on Darwin. For one of them for an Arsenal channel. Actually, that was the first one that I did. I did one for a United fan channel. Then I did like two for Liverpool. So used to doing stuff on Darwin. But look, with regards to Darwin, is he overpriced? Is he not? I don't think that. For me, I'm not going to say that he's a 75 million or 100 million player um, already, but I'm also not going to say that it was overpriced.
Mhm.
So there are a few reasons for that. One, look, center forward is the position where I think things are at a premium. It's very hard to find a top class center forward with um, who has a profile of like a complete striker. Is he fast? Can he run in behind defenses? Is he physical? Is he going to be able to hold up? So there are a few things that Darwin still needs to develop on. But the fact is, he is, I think, without a doubt, a top five center forward amongst his age group, right? U23 players. He has done a fantastic job this season for Benfica. He's finished atop the league scorer charts. He's also done it in the Champions League, scored against some top sides. He scored against Bayern, Barcelona, Ajax, Liverpool, right? So he's done it in the highest level of European football. He's done it in Portugal, which I think, and I think that one of the reasons perhaps why Darwin is costing 75 million is the success of plenty of other players, whether that's Luis Diaz, Bruno Fernandes, Ruben Diaz. If you're a English team, you need to look at I think history. Look at which leagues have done the best job of producing players who are not going to take a while to adapt and who are going to make an immediate impact. And I think that the Primera Liga is quickly becoming one of the top leagues for that. So I think that yes, in many ways, Darwin owes part of that transfer fee to the success of other players. But the fact is, the Primera Liga is not an easy league, and you need to be a very promising talent to get that sort of fee, especially from a club like Liverpool who don't spend wildly as other clubs like Manchester United. So look, I think that one, you have the age, right? He's 22 years of age. He's still far away from reaching his prime. You're not just paying for the Darwin of 2022. You're paying for the Darwin of the next decade, and kind of mapping out his progression. You're paying for a player who's done it in the Champions League, who's also done it in Portugal. Okay, he scored against Sporting in April, pretty much killed off their title challenge. Should have scored against Porto, was wrongly called off due to offsides. So he's shown that he can do it against the top sides in Portugal as well. And another thing as well, you're paying to stave off the competition. There was a lot of competition for Darwin, so if you're just competing with one club, then okay, then I can understand it. But if you're competing against two or three clubs, and there were quite a few teams that were in the running for Darwin, you're going to have to pay over the odds. And yeah, finally, like I said, this is a center forward position. This is something that teams have shown they're willing to spend big bucks for, right? You look at Juventus paying what they did for Dusan Vlahovic, Napoli paying what they did for Victor Osimhen. Even like looking at lesser strikers like what Wolves paid for Fabio Silva or what Arsenal paid for Alexander Lacazette. Even if you're not going for like a top class center forward, you're still going to have to pay a decent bit of money for this player. So for me, I've always been of the opinion that, especially for Arsenal, I've always been of the opinion that like price cannot be an issue for the center forward. You need to spend whatever it takes, especially if that's going to allow you to get a player who's going to be good for not just the next 3 years, but also the next 7 years. To get a player who has that physical capability, who's not just a smaller striker who can run in behind. You need to have that complete package. And I think that Liverpool, they realize that, okay, yes, Darwin still needs some areas to work on, but uh, there probably isn't a single club in Europe that does a better job of taking these guys, these young promising forwards and turning them into world beaters. And when you look at like the best players to play in the Premier League, I think very few of them came as superstars. They came as these sort of under the radar players and emerged into superstars, whether that's Mohamed Salah, Sadio Mane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Eden Hazard, Sergio Aguero. You look at all these players, you're not going for, shall we say, a Robert Lewandowski or a Karim Benzema now. You're going for a player who still hasn't um, made his mark on the world yet. You're looking for someone who's hungry to succeed, and you're looking for somebody who is, still far away from reaching his prime. And look, that's a model that has worked very well for Liverpool. When you look at the likes of Andrew Robertson, Fabinho, Sadio Mane, all these players came when they weren't at the top of their game. Compared to maybe you could compare that to Rafael Varane, or someone of a similar caliber. A player who's hungry, a player who's young, and a player who has not made his mark on top level football yet. I think that's a proven winning formula.
What I'll say about the Darwin Nunez thing is that, like, he's clearly super talented. And if you want to go anywhere and get that development, it's probably going to be Liverpool, development and at the highest level. That's probably the best place that he can go. And they're in a position now where they have so many other forwards that I don't actually think Darwin Nunez needs to be the finished article right off the bat. There'll obviously be that pressure and there'll be those eyes, but I mean, if he were not to play and they were to, let him ease him in, they still have Luis Diaz, they still have Diego Jota, they still have Firmino, they still have Salah. So they still have those great options just in case. I think the only difference here is that, like, with Liverpool, we've never really seen them push out the boat like this, not for a young player. Virgil van Dijk was pretty much, I mean, he wasn't a superstar when they paid for him, but he was a little bit older, and so was Allison. So this is uncharted territory for Liverpool Football Club in this new era. So I have to see kind of how it unfolds. But just to wrap up the Darwin Nunez conversation, what is his biggest weakness and what is his biggest strength?
I think that in terms of weakness, I think there are a few things. He can be a little greedy on the counterattack. I think that there are some options where, also, I think just like making the right pass, maybe
Yeah.
he'll take like 2 or 3 touches, and when he should just do like a short, quick play to his nearby teammate and then make a run behind. So I think that's one thing as well, just like working on being able to link up better, and I think passing. Yeah, those are probably the two things that I would say working on. But looking at his biggest strength, it's hard to say. I think that one, just physical strength. I mean, he's a physical he's a physical specimen. Another thing as well, he's very quick for a big man. He's got plenty of pace to burn. So he's got physical capabilities, which I definitely think fit in well with the Premier League and Liverpool's style of play. So yeah, apart from the physical capabilities, I think that as well, he's just a player who's kind of a natural goal scorer. He's capable of creating separation from his man, finding that pocket of space, peeling off for a cutback, or getting into the far post for a cross. Yeah, I think he's a very complete center forward. Obviously, at 22, not every aspect of your game is going to be fully developed, but I'm pretty confident in this move. I think that he's going to prove a lot of people wrong. I think a lot of people judging Darwin just look at like a 5-second clip where he was doing a bad touch or something, and honestly, you could find a clip of a bad touch or a poor pass of Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar. You can do that for any player in the world. What's funny as well is that one of the biggest clips that people use is a video of like
The miss against Liverpool.
him doing high stepovers where he ends up scoring. And it's funny because like if he was not doing if he did not score that goal against Barcelona, which no schmucks, if he did not do that goal, then people would not have seen that video. So he's
Yeah.
getting punished for a game where he scored in the Champions League, which I think says a lot about this generation, right? The TikTok, Instagram generation. They care more about
Yeah.
clicks and like roulettes than actually scoring goals. But thankfully, they're not in charge of running football teams.
Oh, well said. I mean, I've seen that clip so many times, and I'm like, not everybody's gonna look like Cristiano Ronaldo doing step overs. Like, it is what it is. Like, he kicked the ball in the back of the net, right? So there you go. But there's 260 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys are smashing the likes, and we're gonna move on to Otavio, or how do you pronounce it? So I say it right.
Otavio, that's right.
Okay, Otavio. So, okay, very interested in this one because I do think for me, it feels like it's connected somewhat to the Rafinha situation. That's what it feels like. With Otavio, like I have to be honest, I don't know a lot about him as a player. So I look forward to you giving me some more information about what type of player he is. But he's been linked with Liverpool. I mean, they've kind of distanced themselves from it. I do think Fabrizio Romano came out this morning and said they're not negotiating for him right now. But Leeds and Aston Villa are also heavily linked with this player. Do you think he's like for a team like Leeds? Do you see him as a like for like replacement for Rafinha? What kind of player is he?
I don't see it as a like for like replacement personally. I think that I'm starting to warm to the idea of Leeds selling Rafinha and Calvin Phillips in the same window. Previously, I thought it would be catastrophic, but I think that the way they're going about their business, for me, I get the impression that they think, okay, we can sell our two best players for well above market value, and in doing so, improve the quality and quantity of the squad, which I think is I respect that. But I think that Otavio for me, I don't watch every single Leeds game, but for me, he would probably play in midfield under under Jesse Marsh or in more of a withdrawn role. I don't see him acting as an out and out winger personally.
Right.
So yeah, with regards to Otavio, he's another player who I think, similar to Fabio Vieira, is kind of hard to pinpoint into a certain position or role because he's incredibly versatile. So he's operated in a number of different positions. Um, Last season for Porto, it was typically, I think, uh, Otavio playing on the left wing with Tecatito Corona on the right, um, with with uh, with Sergio Oliveira and Matheus Uribe in the midfield double pivot. This season, with Tecatito kind of declining in form, but also trying to get a move, he was eventually phased out of the team, and Otavio was pushed to the right flank with Luis Diaz playing on the left. Um, so he's showcased that he can be effective in a number of positions. He's played as a double pivot, and I think that Otavio is just so he's in many ways the epitome of Sergio Conceição's Porto. Um, so yeah, I think that he's an incredibly versatile, hardworking player who is a player who definitely if he's on your team, you absolutely love him. If he's not on your team, you hate him.
Mm,
So yeah, Otavio, he was born in the northeast region of Brazil, which is not an easy region to grow up in because the Brazilian clubs, biggest Brazilian clubs, are typically more consolidated into the south, like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. So I think it definitely says a lot about how he had to get there to go from that region to eventually making his way up to Porto. So growing up in Brazil, making the move to Portugal at a young age, and eventually ended up getting Portuguese citizenship. And made his debut for the national team in March, I believe, and was actually one of the most important players behind. Was kind of he was basically thrown into the starting lineup for
Mhm.
these do or die uh, matches to get to the World Cup, and he did absolutely phenomenally there,
Mhm.
and allowed Portugal, I think, to play with a different style. Because he's somebody who's going to be able to fill in a number of different positions and a number of different formations. He's somebody who works hard off the ball, who's aggressive in tackles, but is also capable of, I think dribbling forward, of weaving together some nice passing combinations. So yeah, a player who has worked as a wide midfielder, but I think would do very well as like a right-sided eight in a 4-3-3. That's why I think
Mhm.
Liverpool could make a lot of sense for him. Kind of, somewhat of an attacking midfielder, somewhat of a box-to-box midfielder,
Mhm.
uh, a very versatile player. So yeah, there were a lot of Benfica and Sporting fans who were upset that Otávio got called up because he is like, okay, he's definitely disrespected those clubs during celebrations and whatnot.
Yeah.
He's definitely a bastard for sure to play against, and it makes sense why you would hate him. But that being said, I think that Portugal fans, whether they're Porto, Benfica, or Sporting fans or another team, they just need to recognize what he brings to the team. He's somebody who I think you want to have in your team, even if
Mhm.
that's coming off the bench. He's a very valuable player, and I think one thing that I think explains his importance is that, like, one, I don't have this on the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure he was one of the highest in terms of outfield in terms of minutes played amongst Porto's outfield players. I think he was
Mhm.
probably only behind Chancel Mbemba, if I'm not mistaken, for Porto. But there was, I think this one game, I think in April or March, where he ended up getting a yellow, and if he picked up another yellow, he would have gotten suspended for the next game. And Porto obviously were in the middle of a very intense title race with Sporting. So yes, they were playing against a lot of these smaller teams, but still, if you slip up, then Sporting, will either take the lead or cut it to 3 points. I'm not too sure, but it was very neck and neck. And despite the fact that there was this game against Benfica
Mhm.
coming up on the horizon in the second to last match day, and it would have made sense, I think, in many ways for Otávio to either be rested or to even get a purposeful booking and miss a game and have the suspensions wiped. Sergio Conceição did not take him out. I think that he played the full 90 for pretty much
So
every.
that's how important he is, to
Exactly.
that side,
He didn't
yeah.
even run the risk. Like, there were even some games where, like, Porto were winning 4-2 against Vizela, and, like, with 20, 30 minutes left, and Otavio would still be playing. So that's
Wow.
just how important he is. And, fair play to him, he did not get booked, even though he was one of the more, I think, most booked players in the Primera, but he did not get booked. He remained clear up
Mhm.
until that vital game against Benfica at the Estadio de Luz, where they ended up winning.
I guess okay, so he's 27. So I would like he's unlike Fabio Vieira, like he's prime age. He's somebody that you would imagine would be able to make a step up to the Premier League quite seamlessly, maybe like Bruno Fernandes or Luis Diaz. Would you imagine that maybe his adaptation would be quicker because of his age, or do you still think it would be a real step up for him?
No, I think that Otavio, he is in the prime of his career, as you mentioned, and I think that he would make a smooth adaptation because, like I said, he has a lot of characteristics that are ready made for the Premier League. He's an
Yeah.
aggressive player off the ball. He does very well in these tackles and ground duels. He's a player who can make things work in possession and absolutely vital for everything he brings on and off the ball. So I think that he would have a smooth adaptation. And yeah, the information that I have is that Otavio has a 60 million release clause, 60 million euro release clause, but for whatever reason, that release clause is currently at 40 million. So I guess there was like some summer discount. I'm not really sure, but the information that I have is that the release clause will remain at 40 million euros until July 15th, and then after that it will return to the normal 60 million euro release
So would you
clause.
imagine a deal for him would probably happen before then? Like any team going after him might wanna get it going quickly, right?
Yeah, I mean they would have to, right? Because
Mhm.
you don't want to pay 60 million for a player who for when you can have him for 40 million. So yeah,
Sure.
I think that look, one thing that Porto have been criticized for is selling players for underneath their release clause value, and I think
Mhm.
prior to the last time they sold a player for their full release clause value was Eder Militao going to Real Madrid. So since then they have looking at Luis Diaz, he had a 80 million euro release clause. He ended up getting sold for an initial fee of 45 million, which Porto took, I think, only 36 million because Barranquilla had a 20 million at a 20% sell-on clause. Fabio Vieira, another example. Vitinha will break that trend. I expect his transfer to Paris Saint-Germain to be finalized shortly for the full release clause value of 40 million euros. So yeah, I think that Porto they are not going to negotiate on Otavio, and I don't have any reason to believe that I don't have any reason to believe that these reports are fake with regards to the 40 million release clause because it comes from a very well informed Porto
Mhm.
source. Um, so yeah, I would definitely expect in a number of English teams to try to make that 40 million euro release clause happen. I said, Otavio is so important to um to Sergio Conceição. In my opinion, he's even more important than Vitinha or Fabio Vieira, and you just have to look at how much he's played in that team and how much it's. I don't think it's any coincidence as well that when with Otavio taking a big role in that team, Porto have been able to really become a return to their throne atop Portugal,
Mhm.
and also obviously just have uh, probably one of the best seasons in the history of the Primeira Liga. 91 points, domestic double, 58 games unbeaten. He's been part and parcel of that. So I think that Conceição would be very upset if Otavio leaves. They've already lost. They're going to lose Vitinha and Fabio Vieira. They've probably lost Chancel and Bemba. Although there have been some rumors um, over the past few days that Porto are going to make another offer to renew Mbemba. Mbemba, his contract expires this summer, and it seemed like he would be leaving on a free transfer. The information that I have is that Mbemba wants to make the same wage as Otavio. So Otavio, I'm not 100% sure if he is the highest paid player in this Porto team, but he's definitely one of them because
Mhm.
he recently renewed his deal. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But when you have a 40 million release clause, your hands are tied to negotiating with the club.
Mhm.
I've also the information as well that I've gotten is that Otavio is happy at Porto. He feels good. He feels valued. Maybe he won't accept a move to Leeds if they do trigger his release clause. But with that being said, I think that Leeds would still be a step up financially, and obviously you want to play. I think that pretty much every player wants to play in the Premier League. So it's
What's your temperature on it? Like, what's your I know you
yeah.
maybe you don't know, but, like, just from your personal feeling, like, do you think he'll make the move to Leeds or the Premier League, or do you think he will stay?
It's a tricky one. Look, I think I've there have been some very credible reports that Leeds have made an offer for him
Uh-huh.
around the region of I think 30 million. So I'm tempted to say that he will leave. When there's smoke, there's fire. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that I definitely don't think it's close to happening right now, but I would not be surprised if it's something that ends up happening. Porto this season, it definitely has the makings of a fire sale. Looking at Luis Diaz leaving in January, Mbemba potentially leaving uh, on a free transfer, Vitinha and Fabio Vieira being sold. Yeah, Otavio would be the natural next one. So Porto, I think the elephant in the room that a lot of people are not talking about is that fact is they have been treading water financially for
Oh,
quite some
wow.
while. Have been under that threat of FFP. So I'm not going to say that selling three players is going to put them in the clear, but it'll definitely give them some breathing room. It'll allow them to pursue some of their biggest targets. I know that Porto are looking at signing a center back. I know that they are also been talks as well. I think about Andre Almeida from Vitória de Guimarães. So I think I could certainly see Porto cashing in on Otavio. Well, not cashing in because I don't think that they would be happy to just receive 40 million, but that's all that they may end up getting for them, of course.
Wow.
But yeah, that's it. In if you're a Portuguese team, that's just got to be your blueprint. You go. Looking at Sporting, they're going to sell João Palhinha for 20 million euros plus 2 million in add-ons to Fulham. Personally, I think that they could have gotten more. But with that being said, when you're bringing in a player like Hidamasa Morita from a smaller Portuguese team in Santa Clara for what 3 million, less than 4 million euros, like it
Hmm.
makes sense. Same thing with Porto, right? They're I think that they will end up selling Otavio, replacing him with Andre Almeida or plenty of other players linked. So and for a much smaller fee, and then the cycle repeats itself. So look, Porto, and I think that cashing in on these players when they're at the maybe not at the height of their prime, but when they are on the spotlight and repeating that formula, that's the only way forward when you're looking at it.
Hmm.
When for Portuguese teams, which frankly do not have the same financial dimensions as other teams. So even with selling Otavio, they still have Wenderson Galeno, Pepe on the flanks. They're going to need to bring in some players there for sure. Expect
Hmm.
them to bring in some players in central midfield as well, with Vitinha and Fabio and Otavio leaving. So yeah, they're definitely their work is already cut out for them. They haven't made a signing yet, so yeah, we'll see what happens. But I do think that Porto, um, I think that they definitely have a long rebuilding task ahead of them.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like it, but I definitely understand from your perspective, like this is the blueprint for them to get back on solid ground financially. So it makes a lot of sense. Now, quickly, just before, because I know only have you for a couple more minutes, but I wanted to touch on Palhinha and Matheus Nunez, two other players. There's just so many that look like they could be making the jump from. I think both of them are at Sporting, right? And they could both be going to the Premier League. Palhinha most likely or most heavily linked or going to Fulham, and Matheus Nunes to Wolves. What's your sense on these two players? Both midfield players, both look really good on compilations. I have to say these players look good on compilations, but what's your sense on these two players and their perspective or potential moves?
Well, yeah, starting off with Palhinha, he's a player who I think broke onto the scene early on for Sporting under Jorge Jesus, I believe. Then
Mhm.
went out on loan to Braga for a few years. Eventually started playing under Ruben Amorim and doing very well there. Returned, actually, it's funny, I believe he was actually close to joining a Russian team in 2020, but the deal ended up breaking down and Palhinha ended up staying put and playing an absolutely vital role in Sporting's first Primera Liga title in 19 years. So yeah, he's for me he's like a midfield destroyer, very good at winning the ball back off opponents, winning ground duels, and just protecting his defense. Um, I think he's also gotten better in terms of spreading the ball out with his passing, but uh, I don't think that he's as technical as other defensive midfielders. He's not going to be a player who's going to weave through other players with his dribbling. He's for me, he's far more of a destroyer in midfield. So I think that it was a matter of time. I expected them actually to sell him last summer, but they ended up keeping hold of him. Um, but I was confident that they would end up selling him because he is, I think, 26, 27, around the same age as Otavio, which is, I think, yes, it's not old, but think about it, when you get to 28 or 29, that is around the age where I think top European teams, they start cooling off their interest, and considering too old. So it is, I think, one of the last times you are going to get a chance to sell him. So 20 million euros, it's not what I would have expected for sure, but it's also not the worst deal in the world for Sporting. They still have Matheus Nunes. They're going to bring in Hida Morita from Santa Clara to replace him. And they have a very talented player, talented midfielder in Daniel Bragança, as well as Manuel Ugarte, who joined from Famalicão on loan. Actually, the shirt that I'm wearing right now, Famalicão are a good club with that know how to scout these talents. And yeah, Ugarte was playing for Famalicão for, I think, a few months, after joining from this Uruguayan side Fenix in January, and just like, I guess, 5 months later, he was on the move to Sporting. So and he's already played regularly. I think in many ways he's actually proven to be an upgrade on Palhinha, even though Palhinha ended up returning to the starting lineup in the final weeks of the season. But he's very talented, and I think that Sporting knew it's not going to make sense for us to have Palhinha, Ugarte, and Matheus in the same midfield. One of them is going to need to leave. I think that there's a good chance that both of them, both Matheus and Palhinha, will end up leaving. But yeah, I definitely would expect Matheus to go for quite a lot more than Palhinha. Um, in fact, I remember when Sporting hired Ruben Amorim from Braga. This was just after a few months of him working at Braga, working in the Primeira Liga. It was a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a manager with very little experience. And a lot, the Sporting president was getting Frederico Varandas was getting a lot of criticism, but Varandas ended up saying, like, we are going to pay for the Amorim appointment by selling Matheus Nunes. And this was when Matheus was like maybe a fifth choice, sixth choice midfielder. Like, I think that he hadn't done anything for Sporting since making the move from Estoril. But he's been proven right. So I think that Matheus, his talent has been there from the start, and I think that the biggest reason as well why Sporting did not make the loan move for João Mario permanent is because they realized that, look, Matheus may not be better than João in certain aspects, but whereas João Mario is 31, he isn't going to renew his value at all. Matheus, one, he's on a much lower wage, and two, he's actually going to be able to land us a profit. And if we buy João Mario, Matheus is not going to have the ability to showcase his talent with a starting spot. So Sporting made that decision, despite the fact that they didn't win the title. I think that it was the correct decision. Matheus has been, without a doubt, one of the best midfielders in the Primera this season. I do think that he sort of fell off in form, specifically after Pep Guardiola called him, I think.
I was literally about to say that. Do you think it may have something to do with Man City looking at him and then maybe getting nervous or something? Because that's where he got, I think, some Arsenal fans started to pay attention to him, is because he was linked with Manchester City, and we were looking for somebody to play as a left eight, and he was kind of more like box to box, more of like an athletic profile, not as technical. Like, I'm not saying he's not a technical player, but maybe not as technical as maybe Arteta would have wanted. But he looks like he's maybe going to Wolves, or maybe that's a team that he would go to. Do you think that's in anticipation of maybe Ruben Neves moving on, or just a different option than Matinho? What do you think the idea is there for Wolves in regards to Núñez?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the deal is with Matheus Nunes and Wolves. I mean, I think that yes, he would want to go to a higher uh, level Premier League team. That's obvious, but
Hmm.
I could certainly see him making a move to Wolves. You know, they are a financial upgrade over Sporting. You're playing in the most demanding league in football, so I don't personally. I don't think he'd reject the move.
Hmm.
It'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. But yeah, as you mentioned, I think that one of my biggest criticisms of Mateos is that he has been in many ways a lot very ineffective against some deeper blocks that are going to sit back and shut off space. So when Mateus does not have like open space to exploit with his dribbling, with his runs, that we see in a lot of big games, he's not going to be as effective. I think he's a player with who is technically gifted, but is also I think thrives on his physicality and his speed. And that's one of the reasons why he's been he's been he's been seamlessly adapted into the starting lineup after playing a
Hmm.
bench role in their championship winning season. A player who can get forward, get into good goal scoring positions, a very good dribbler, and who can push the ball forward. But with that being said, I do think that he needs to work more on breaking down deep blocks, which ironically I think is one of the things that makes Fabio Vieira so unique, right? A lot, and that I think that comes with intelligence and patience, knowing how to break down these organized, compact defenses, whether it's with
Yeah.
dribbling or passing, not rushing everything. That's something that I think Matheus still needs to work on. But with that being said, he did, I think, um, after a poor run of form, there were a few games where he showed his class in the end of the season and showcased why he's a very talented midfield prospect. So I like Mateus. I think I probably would have put him in my bench for the Primera Liga team of the season. I know that he was on the official Primera team of the season.
Hmm.
Personally, I think that Mateus Uribe did a better job, but I won't lie. Matheus Nunes has been he's done fairly well for Sporting, and not many players I think also have stood out for the Sporting team
Yeah.
apart from Pablo Sarabia following his loan arrival from Paris Saint Germain. So yeah, Matheus he clearly has a lot to work on, just like Darwin, just like Fabio, just like all these young players that are coming out of Portugal. But I definitely think that he is ready made for the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, he's an exciting player. Like, he definitely pops off the screen for sure. And like you said, great dribbler, very athletic, box to box type of guy. And I do think some Arsenal fans were disappointed to see that we didn't have like any interest in him. But I think when you look at players that we're clearly being linked to in this transfer window, we're probably going in a different direction, which we just have to see what happens with that. But Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show. I do really appreciate it. I know we went through so many different players, but I wanted to make sure that we touched on as many as possible that could potentially be coming to the Premier League. So if they do come, like Fabio Vieira and Darwin Nunez, there's some information out there about them. So thank you so much. Can you let people know where to find you one more time?
Absolutely, yeah. You can find me on ZACHLOWY on Twitter as well as BTLVid on Twitter and breakinglines.com. We've got, like I said, we've got a plenty of great Arsenal content coming up there, as well as on our TikTok and Instagram pages.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to you for now. Bye. All right. So, you guys, just to let you know, there will be a show later at 6:30 p.m. UK time. Daily download. We'll talk about Gabriel Jesus, Lisandro Martinez, Rafinha, all of the active, deals going on for Arsenal. So make sure that you guys come back then. All of Zach's information is in the description box, so you guys can go ahead and look at some of his content there. But yeah, 6:30 p.m. UK time, I will be back for more of a just Arsenal based content and around the transfer window. So, all right, you guys, I'll see you guys on the next one. Like, subscribe. Bye, y'all.